From the Dominion Post in Morgantown, West Virginia, this is the Postcast, the audio companion to the Dominion Post newspaper. It takes a village to reduce opioid overdoses. The Preston County Health Department gets a new logo. Indictments from Monongalia County's first grand jury of the year. And we wish Mario's Fishbowl a happy 70th. These are the week's top stories. I'm your host, Chris Schultz. A piece in Monday's paper told the story of John Schaefer, a Grafton native who is now in recovery from an addiction to heroin and opioids. Schaefer overdosed over a dozen times before team members from Monongalia County's quick response team helped him access the resources he needed to start his recovery process. I'm joined now by phone by Brittany Eyrich of the Monongalia County Health Department's quick response team, and also John Dower, the Director of Operations for West Virginia Sober Living. Thank you both for taking the time to call in and speak with me today about this very important story.
Thank you for having us.
Brittany, I'd like to start by having you tell me, in your own words, what exactly the quick response team is.
So our quick response team is a group of individuals that are all based in Monongalia County. We've got law enforcement officers, we've got EMS, we got MECA 911, we got the peer recovery coaches, we've got local pharmacists. Sometimes we have religious organizations join us. So the basic idea of our QRT is to identify individuals who have overdosed, and we do this by getting overdose reports from EMS, MECA 911, and law enforcement officers, and they share those reports through a Dropbox, and the peer recovery coaches go into the Dropbox and they retrieve these reports, and they take the information that they can and try to follow up with the individuals to offer them services and access to treatment. Ideally, they try and follow up within 24 to 72 hours. That doesn't always happen, just depending on how soon our partners can get the reports to them.
What is the importance of getting to these overdose victims in that time frame?
Sure, and I'm going to speak to that a little bit. The idea is that this is a pretty substantial event in the individual's lives. Unfortunately for people with substance use disorder, their willingness to change or the stage of change that they are in may alter from minute to minute. So the quicker that you can access and address these concerns with an individual after one of these events, the more likely they may be amendable to seeking services. Now, we don't dictate the services. We're certainly going to leave the autonomy to the individual that we engage, but we understand substance use is much more than simply using a substance. Oftentimes, these individuals have concerns from housing to food to insurance needs to a myriad of topics that prevent them from living a healthy lifestyle. And the peer recovery coach is going to attempt to meet that individual where they're at and connect them to those services, from harm reduction to medication-assisted treatment to comprehensive treatment in a behavioral health setting to really child care, emergency services, a primary care physician. This is certainly a problem that needs more than just substance use disorder treatment to make an impact in our county.
That's fantastic to hear. And something that you mentioned just there is the myriad of services that a program like the Quick Response Team and WV Peers offers. How were you all able to bring all these organizations together to collaborate when oftentimes they don't? How were you able to bring everyone together to work towards a unified goal?
It definitely took some time, and it wasn't easy, but I think just getting people in the room and hearing these success stories. John and Dan from Sober Living constantly share stories from people who are in recovery now, people that they've helped, and I think that whenever the law enforcement officers and EMS workers get to hear that, it really shows that you can make a difference, and it's really important for us to all get together and help out instead of working individually and being in these silos.
That's just wonderful to hear. And Brittany, I just really quickly want to ask you, what has your experience been as part of the quick response team in the room with these clients that you work with immediately after they've had, as John referenced earlier, such an impactful event in their life?
It's been really eye-opening. I did not know a lot about this area before we started this project, so it's been a learning experience, and it's been very eye-opening, and it's just so awesome to see the impact that we're making and hear these success stories. I love seeing everybody get together and come and want to make a difference in the community. It's just been really awesome.
John, I'd like to ask you the same question. What has your experience been with this whole process? I know that obviously the story focused on John Schaefer, but you've clearly had many more cases. What has been your experience going through this process with these individuals?
Well, I think first I'd like to state I'm a person in long-term recovery myself. There is an understanding of just how desperate these individuals are. There's a misconception that individuals at the end of their addiction are using to get high, and more often than not, they're using to stay well or using to avoid pain. There is something that is just special and hard to articulate to really view the impact to the families of these individuals that finding meaningful recovery through the quick response team and the amazing work that the health department does and our first responders do and my peer recovery coaches do, to see a child have the mother or father back in their lives, to see a mom not to have to bury her son because he found treatment, for a sister or a brother to see that hope is possible. That's why we do this. And John Schaefer isn't the only one. I promise you he may be the one that has been highlighted, but I've worked for West Virginia Sober Living since 2013, and we would be on this call for hours for me to tell you all the success stories that have happened. There's a big misconception in a lot of media about drug addicts in our community. What is underserved and underscored is how many people are in meaningful recovery in our community, that are tax-paying citizens, that are the people that are doing positive changes in this community, and that only happens if they have the chance to get healthy and get well. And the health department, with the help of all these partners, really allows us the capacity to give those people that hope. And to me, that's what the quick response team is. It's not about saving the drug addict. It's about altering the community for the better.
Well, that's great to hear. And obviously, you're doing great work. And I want to let our listeners know, if they themselves or a family member or a friend are looking to access these recovery resources, can you tell us where can they go to find that information?
So sure. To access our recovery coaches that will provide linkages to the whole myriad of services we referred to earlier, they can call West Virginia Peers at 304-602-3305. If they would like to learn more about the West Virginia Peers Initiative, they can visit our website at wvpeers.com.
Brittany and John, I'd like to thank you again for taking the time to call in today and speaking with me about this important issue. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you for having us.
The Preston Board of Health has a new logo thanks to a Preston High School senior, Benjamin Pell. Benjamin won a competition put on by the Preston County Health Department with a design he made on his phone. And joining me now via phone is the regional editor, Cathy Plumb. Cathy, thank you so much for calling in today.
Thank you for having me.
Now, Cathy, the health department didn't have its own logo until they held this competition. What motivated them to find and design a logo now?
The Health Department Director, V.J. Davis, felt it's important that when people saw communications from the department, whether they be hard copy paper or something they see online, that they realize it's from the Health Department and not from the county in general. And once he made that decision, he thought, well, wow, let's get some young people involved in this.
Obviously, as we mentioned, this was a competition specifically for high school students. What was the motivation for them to involve high school students rather than hiring, say, a local design firm?
Mr. Davis is very adamant about getting young people involved with their own health and that of the public in general. And he also encourages them to be civic-minded. So he thought by doing this that you do get some local input from a very young level, and also it gave him a chance to showcase what our students can do.
Now, you actually spoke to Benjamin, the competition winner. Did he tell you anything about what inspired him in his design?
Yes, he said that first he looked around at some logos in use other places, and then he looked around at Preston County and what was important to him and to the people of Preston County. The design he ultimately came up with was a circle that has the words Preston County Health Department. In the center are two open hands. They are holding an outline of the county and a family, because he felt that really represented what Preston County meant to him.
Well, that sounds lovely, and I'm sure that our listeners and our readers will be seeing that popping up in all health department communications and publications soon. Cathy, I want to thank you so much for calling in today and discussing this story with me.
Thank you.
112. That's the number of indictments returned by the Monongalia County Grand Jury on Monday, the first of 3 this year and every year. Here now to discuss with me is Cops and Court reporter for the Dominion Post, Will Dean. Will, thanks so much for being here and talking about this with me.
Thanks for having me. It's always a fun time.
So, Will, that number 112, it sounds like a lot. Is that in line with the number of indictments that we have seen in the past in Monongalia County?
Yeah, since I've been doing this, it's about normal. At this time last year, we had 132, and last May, which is the second each year, actually had the same number, 112, and September's grand jury was a little light with 91.
So Monongalia County, as we mentioned, does 3 grand juries a year. Why only 3?
So I've had various defense attorneys tell me that places like New York City actually convene grand juries every day. And that's just because of the volume of cases that they have here. Mon County and other places in West Virginia simply don't have the numbers to necessitate that kind of number of grand juries. Yeah.
So speaking of that, what kind of crime, what kind of action requires an indictment?
Every felony. A felony, if you didn't know, is any crime that carries a potential penalty of more than a year in jail. So things like grand larceny, murder, malicious assault, things like that. Not simple possession of drugs.
Okay. So let's backpedaling a little bit here in our civic lesson. What exactly is a grand jury, and what are they doing when they indict somebody?
So prosecutors call a grand jury, and they present their evidence to the grand jury, and the grand jury has to decide if there's enough evidence for the prosecution to move forward. 9 of 13 of them have to agree, and that returns what's called a true bill, which means a person is indicted. If less than 9 people agree, it is not a true bill, and the person is not indicted.
So in this batch of indictments, what stood out to you?
So several cases that I wrote about when the alleged acts first happened were in there, but one that particularly stood out to me, as I remember the day very well, was the indictment for Craig Marcus Coe, and he was indicted on charges of recklessly fleeing in a vehicle, escape, and 2 counts of grand larceny. At the time that this incident happened, Marcus Coe was allegedly an inmate, and he was at Ruby Memorial receiving some treatment when he decided to supposedly steal an ambulance and try to make a break for it. I was actually in the office that day when it first happened, and I went out there, and it was an event.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, Will, I hear you using words like allegedly, is accused of, things of that nature. Why are you using that type of language if the grand jury has determined through their indictment that there is enough evidence to charge this person?
There's a whole lot of reasons. Legally, technically, they are not guilty. They are innocent. The way our legal system works, 12 people have to decide unanimously that this person did what he was or she was accused of.
So the indictment is just the first step in that much longer process.
Yeah, it means just as much with respect to your guilt as being arrested does.
Now, Will, you obviously, as you mentioned, oftentimes cover these arrests and these events as they're happening. Was there anything that you were expecting to see that was not in this batch of indictments?
I wouldn't say I was expecting to see it, but a former city council candidate, Aaron Metz, a few days before the grand jury, some election fraud related charges were filed against him, and he certainly could have been indicted. However, in my experience, when crimes get charged that close to a grand jury, they typically don't get indicted. I would fully expect to see him in May. And part of the reason I think that the prosecutor's office waits is because once someone's indicted, a clock starts ticking because one of the constitutional amendments is the right to a speedy trial. So if all their ducks aren't in a row, you're not going to go ahead and start that clock early.
Okay. Now, what is the next step for these cases now that they've been indicted?
So the cases will get divvied up between the 3 circuit court judges and the people who are indicted, which there were not 112 people indicted. There were 112 indictments. Some people have 1 indictment. Some people have 4 indictments. I believe that's the record for this go-round. And the people who are indicted will appear before the judge. They will plead not guilty, and their cases will be entered onto the docket, and then they will proceed through the criminal justice system.
Will, I want to thank you for taking the time to do our civic duty here and educate the public about what it really means, these terms that we often hear on criminal procedure shows like Law and Order and, things of that nature. Thanks for clearing that up for us. I'm sure we'll be seeing you again soon as these cases progress.
Yeah, it's not Law and Order. There's not a doink doink and a resolution. I'm sure we'll still be talking about some of these this time next year.
Ending on a lighter note this week, last Friday marked the 70-year anniversary for a Morgantown institution, Mario's Fishbowl. Reporter Jim Bissett was present for the celebration, and joining us now to talk about the celebration is Jim himself. Jim, thanks for being here with me.
Hey, Chris. Good to be with you.
So just to start off, for the uninitiated, can you explain to us what Mario's Fishbowl is?
Morgantown has a lot of great neighborhoods. If a great neighborhood is lucky, it has a great neighborhood bar. In the case of the Woodburn neighborhood, it has Mario's Fishbowl, which has been around. Really, the business itself, the building has been around since 1949. Mario's Fishbowl, as Morgantown knows it, has been around since 1973.
So they're counting that span of time before they actually became the Fishbowl as part of the 70 years.
Yeah, just for that longevity. Because 70 years is a long time to be anywhere in business.
And so what was there before the Fishbowl took over?
What was there before was a little confectionery that sold ice cream. It sold beer on tap. It was owned and operated by a husband and wife. Tom and Anna Torch were their names. Tom died in 1963, and Anna sold the place to Mario and Rose Spina, a fun little couple in Morgantown who made it Mario's Fishbowl, and it remains Mario's Fishbowl to this day.
So named after the former owner, Mario. What about the fishbowl? Where's that part of the name coming from?
What the fishbowl is, it's a goblet made by the former West Virginia Glass Company. If you know Seneca Center on Beechhurst Avenue, for the folks from Morgantown, that used to be a glass factory. I mean, Morgantown was a big deal in glass making. So Jackie Kennedy was a fan of Morgantown glass.
Oh, look at that.
Because as it turns out, let's see, I wrote this down so I could remember it. She was a big fan of the goblets that were made by the Morgantown Glass Company, which also made the goblets that became the fishbowl goblets. And Jackie Kennedy encountered these at the Carlton Hotel in New York City. So her and her husband make that legendary campaign swing through West Virginia in 1960, and they tour the glass plant. And she is so taken with this glass that she ordered hundreds of pieces for when after Jack became president. And, hey, we're moving in the White House. This is what I want, as she set about furnishing the White House. So,
well, that's fantastic. Yeah, you can drink with royalty, American royalty.
After the fact, yeah, you can.
So how did they celebrate their Platinum Jubilee?
They just did what they've been doing since 1963. I mean, there were some sponsors for giveaways involved, but it was just basically, I thought, business as usual. You come out, you enjoy some food, you drink some beer from a fishbowl or your beverage of choice from a fishbowl, and you just have fun. You just enjoy the atmosphere that is Mario's Fishbowl.
That sounds like a great time. Now, 70 years is an accomplishment for any institution. What is it about Mario's Fishbowl that keeps locals coming back year after year?
Yeah, I think it's the people, it's the memories. There's also a Mario's in Suncrest, a second location, but if you go in that original location, up on Richwood, you'll see the walls are just lined with pieces of paper. And on those pieces of paper are just in-the-moment notes that just generations of patrons have written down over the years. Some of them are kind of silly, like, hey, so-and-so chugged a fishbowl in however many seconds flat. I saw expat notes. These are WVU graduates had gone on to live abroad. Like one kid had moved to Paris and she came back. Said came all the way back from Paris, France to my favorite bar. Another guy proposed marriage. I wrote that in my story if you had a chance to see it.
That was your opener.
Yeah, that was I led with that. It was Sullivan. Didn't know his name, but his buddies wrote that he had proposed to his girlfriend. I don't know if he did it at Mario's or not, but obviously Mario's was part of the event in some form or another, and they thought enough of it to write it down, record it for the ages, and post it on the wall there.
Now, something you wrote about is you can't see the entire note. So we don't know if they went there to celebrate or to drown their sorrows.
Yeah, I'm going to hope that she said yes, but I didn't see all the note, and I didn't want to see all the note. I wanted to write it. I just wanted to leave it out there in the air, like it's like an old John Prine song or something like that. I wanted people thinking about it. Hey, how did their lives turn out? Because we're going to hope that she said yes.
Write your own ending to Sullivan's story.
Oh, yeah.
Well, here's to 70 years at Mario's Fishbowl and hopefully another 70 in Morgantown. Jim, thanks so much for coming in here and talking with me about this.
Hey, thanks for having me, Chris.
And that is all for this week's episode. You can find all the articles we discussed today at DominionPost.com. The links will also be in the description of the episode on your podcasting app. If you have not already, be sure to subscribe to make sure you don't miss an episode. We would also really appreciate it if you would take the time to rate and review the show. We want to hear from you. If you want to get into contact with me, you can email podcast@dominionpost.com, or you can reach out on any of the Dominion Post social media. We are at Dominion Post WV on Twitter, at Dominion Post _WV on Instagram, or on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Dominion Post WV. You can also tweet directly at me at Schultz Reports. That's SCHULZ, no T. Be sure to check out our sports podcast, Best of 7, and also keep an eye out for our local history podcast, All About History, dropping next week. We're producing that in conjunction with the library's All Center here in Morgantown, and it should be pretty interesting. Thanks so much for listening, and see you back here next week.